Ah. Okay, let's kick off. So welcome back, first of all, and I think you'll agree that the first panel really set the tone for the discussion that we're going to have. We focused in the first session very much on the political dynamics of the relationship, but we want to explore certain issues that were mentioned in the first panel, but really we didn't have time to go more into detail. And one of the things that I think we keep repeating because we mean it, is because it all depends, development, growth, transformation, reform, all the things we keep talking about really depend on two things. Well, it depends on policies, of course, but also the dynamism, energy, the vibrancy of women. Agenda 2030 development growth is about women and also about unlocking the energy and the creativity of young people, millennials, if you like, but young people more generally. And I think we all, the Western Balkan governments, but also us in Europe, we can take pride in the talent and the dynamism and the energy of the young people in the Western Balkans. Now, we heard this morning that many are actually emigrating, even more so than before, to Western Europe, to the European Union. And that is perhaps a sense of disappointment at not, the slowness of the accession process, but also because it's often felt that jobs and growth are there. So we wanted to talk also about why so few women are in the labor force in the Western Balkans. So to do that, as I said, this is a round table, but I would like to introduce our Kickstarters, who will sort of lay the main points on the agenda, and then we'll take it forward in our conversation, which will last about an hour. Let me introduce Aji Veres. She's Deputy Regional Director at the UNDP, Regional Bureau for Europe and the Commonwealth of Independent States. You are in the Istanbul Regional Hub, and you're supporting 17 countries, one territory on 2030 agenda. And we're going to talk about what is driving the younger people to leave their homes. Is it in search of jobs, or is it in search of something different, less tangible, if you like? Also very proud to have with us Nicole Farnsworth. She is Program Director and Lead Researcher at the Kosovo Women's Network, and she leads research teams and co-authors reports at Kosovo Women's Network that advocates on behalf of women. And we're also very proud to have with us Rudina Hajdari. She's member of the Albanian Parliament, and you have represented Albania's capital, Tirana, for several years now. So thank you very much for being here as well. So Aji, let's kick off with you. And the question, as I said, was, we hear about the emigration and young people leaving. What does your research, what does your inquiry show?
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to pick up a statement or a quote from the previous discussions that we had, where one of the speakers was saying, essentially, by the time there's EU accession materializes in the Western Balkans, most of the Western Balkans people will be already in the EU. So the discussions that we're having actually pay a lot of attention to the processes and to the political side as well. But they lack the focus on the changing patterns, on actually the outward migration, the youth and women in this picture. So we all know that about 1/3 of the Western Balkans is actually living already outside of the region. And those who are staying in the Western Balkans, an average, as a proxy indicator, an average employee in the Western Balkans earns about 1/4 of the salary of somebody doing the same job in Austria. So, partially people are leaving, and those who are leaving really do not have the opportunity to go forward. But the thing that I would like to, or the theme that I would like to pick up on is really, this is way beyond now about jobs and the economic situation in the Western Balkans. When we look at the patterns, the new pattern of out of migration is not solely economic and job motivated. So while in the past we were focusing on job creation and the economic conditions, I think we need to change and shift our mindset to look at a complex picture of economic, social, and ecological motivation of young people. the generation that we are dealing with, the youth and the millennials, they have a very different mentality from previous generations who have gone through the crisis in the Western Balkans. Their expectations, their aspirations, their motivations and incentives are very different from the populations that we as development professionals and the EU has been having this dialogue with over decades, and the groups that we are focusing on. And I think this nuance is extremely important because the lack of job prospect is one aspect, and there obviously needs to be a lot of attention on job creation, the labor market, understanding the labor market. But it's way beyond this point, and young people really want to have the kind of access to be kind of global citizens, the kind of access to world-class services, living standards, education, digitalization, the connectivity. These are the things that matter. And if you look at some of the patterns of the countries that joined the EU and when turbulence happened is, when internet prices go up, that's when young people actually start paying attention, less so on policies that they don't fully understand. So my point is on the youth, first of all, we need to talk to the youth that's most affected. We are engaging the youth in our programs, but a lot of times, I must say, we engage the youth that it's easiest for us to access. We engage the youth who are already active, who are here, who are already organized to engage with us, and we are missing the youth who are the most marginalized, who are living in rural areas, who are not engaging in these processes. And I think that's the population that we also need to bring their voices and their aspirations in. The second main point I'd like to make is really about the educational side of why we have this kind of job market picture. Today's the quality of education, the type of education that releases young people after universities, even in tertiary educations, but also from the secondary education, is not at par with the needs of the job market. And it's definitely with a huge gap on the private sector requirements. So essentially, the private sector spends enormous resources and time completely reskilling and retooling people so that they can be employable. And given the fact that there is this outgoing migration of young people seeking jobs outside of the Western Balkans, the population that's actually left has even a bigger gap in this job market picture. So I think there are many things that can be done there in terms of investing in human capital. We speak a lot about investing in human capital. But if we just focus on the educational part of it, we need to put our hats together when we talk about digitalization, when we talk about quality education, when we talk about youth engagement. These need to come together, because we cannot talk about digitalization in government institutions and in the private sector and the online and gig economy taking off without translating that into skill creation through the education system that would allow young people to go out of the universities and then engage in these sectors. So unless we really look at it as a holistic picture and bring this complexity into our responses and putting the resources, both in terms of the EU preparation and us as development professionals working with the Western Balkan countries, I think we are continuing to actually support the widening gap instead of closing that gap. So we need to reshape skills for the future. There are many good initiatives in Bosnia, IT Girls initiatives. We can also learn from other regions, Girls for Tech, Women for STEM, that we are working on. So this goes to the role of women, where the picture is even more acute. Women are less likely to go into the educational areas that are related to STEM, so technology, engineering, mathematics, and so forth. So that means this unemployability or very little employability of women is even more severe, because they tend to go to as Mylinda also pointed out, into the social sciences sector, and they don't actually have the information that going through a 4-year education with social sciences will not land them a job. So I think all of these factors then exacerbate the effect on women. And especially on rural women who even have less access to the information to them to make the right decisions for their life choices. I don't want to go on forever because I think it's very important we engage, but I really just want to put out some of these ideas for our discussions. So the last one I'd like to say beyond the idea of youth, women engagement and the reshaping of the skills sector is the social aspect of the depopulation in the Western Balkans. One of the factors actually has nothing to do with economics. It doesn't have to do with the jobs and the prospects, but it has to do with the trust of governments, the trust of government institutions, that they actually feel, young people feel that there's a merit-based system that would allow them to reach what they need to reach if they just do what they have to do. And this lack of confidence that the governments are transparent, that corruption is actually addressed, and that institutions are reforming in a meaningful way, not just to comply with certain requirements for the EU accession, this creates a lot of mistrust and in the future of young people. So even if they have to take a job much lower of their skill level outside of the Western Balkans and going to the EU, they will do that because they feel that their merit-based advancement will take them where they want to be, which they cannot get in their own countries. So this then coupled, of course, with the discussions that I think everybody knows, so I don't want to go into the details on the whole idea of social services, social inclusion, engagement for the welfare services. Those are still very present, and I think we know them very well. But I wanted to bring in a few ideas for a little bit of provocation of what we can discuss meaningfully and change the narrative and shift the discussions.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you. Very, very strong points, and some things that we were not aware of. I mean, I didn't realize that a third of the population was already outside the region, within the European Union. A couple of questions I just wanted to follow up on. Brain drain, but is there any indication, any data on people going back or circular brain circulation? And when you said global citizens, I thought of global nomads, digital nomads. So are some of these people, even if they're young people, even if they're not working in the region, are they still working for the region? You can answer this now, yeah.
I mean, certainly, I think there is an attempt to, and it's not just brain drain. It's about the brain waste as well. So brain drain going out of the region, but the brain waste because the skill sets are not actually used to their fullest capacity. In terms of going back, I think there are some examples from Portugal and I guess in Poland and the early joiners from the Eastern Bloc to the European Union, where there was a significant brain drain and some of it came back. But frankly, that requires a major shift of what they come back to. There are some policies, for example, tax rebates or financial incentives to attract young people back. But I think there are two main conditions that need to be met. One, a lot of them coming back because they want to invest back in their countries. So that means the actual foreign direct investment conditions and the investment climate in the countries need to change. And one of the main elements of it is about corruption and transparency. And the second is if there is no shift in the governance, institutional mechanisms, even if the job market may be changing or there are these financial incentives, a lot of the incentives of the millennials and this generation has not changed. So they're not going to come back for that. So I think these factors we have to consider, although the inwards or backwards migration is important. But one thing related to that is about the diaspora. So how can these countries engage the diaspora in actually changing transforming the countries inside the countries? And there are some very good examples. We are working in Bosnia, for example, on some projects with the diaspora to create conditions and investments for the country. And the second one is, as you said, is basically it's becoming a digital world with online economy and digital economy very much taking the lead in the economic growth and transformation. So that also is without borders. So even though people who are outside, they may be able to contribute to the economy of their own countries while living outside. I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So, Nicole, we were talking about also the low rates of women in employment, and your network is working on getting rid of some of the discriminatory measures that exist. Just tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how you see the situation changing.
Thank you. Yes, I'll present some of the key findings that we found in terms of preventing women's labor force discrimination in the region based on some research that our network of more than 165 women's rights organizations throughout the region has been doing. One of the main root causes, which seems very obvious but we never talk about, is traditional gender norms and stereotypes. It's still very widespread that women's role is in the household, and if there's a child, the woman should be the one taking care. I think until we address these fundamental gender stereotypes, which are not unique to the region but also exist in much of Europe, we will have troubles actually creating and paving a way for more women to enter into the labor force. Of course, related to that is the occupational stereotypes, which has already been mentioned, and the guidance of which paths girls and boys should take when they go through school. Another major issue that I think we need to talk about a lot more in the Western Balkans is the Barcelona objectives. Very few of Western Balkan countries have made way in achieving the Barcelona objectives, which foresee greater childcare and preschool availability for children. This prevents a major issue for women's labor force participation, as said, because they're the traditional caregivers. So, for example, in Kosovo, where I'm from, it's almost non-existent childcare until the age of 4 or 5, which means someone must be staying at home to care for the child. So addressing this could really open the door for women's labor force participation. Another major issue we have come across is, of course, the informal economy, which we've already talked about today. It affects women and men, but there are unique ways in which the informal economy is affecting women, such as working for family businesses where they are not paid, where there are no workers' rights respected, where they don't put in for pensions, which contributes to poverty among women, which is higher in old age than among men, and also in protections for maternity leave rights. Our latest study has focused on gender-based discrimination. I also have copies of it here if you're curious, throughout the Western Balkans. We have found in a survey of more than 4,570 people across the Balkans that gender-based discrimination is incredibly widespread against women. 1 in 3 women respondents had been sexually harassed at work. More than half had been discriminated against in hiring through questions, do you plan to have children, how many children do you have, and therefore not hiring them because they may plan to have children. And this related also to discrimination in contract length. Employers are regularly making short contracts with women in order to escape from paying for maternity leave or having to retrain new people, which directly contributes also to discrimination against women in hiring. For again, in Kosovo, where I'm from, we have employers outright stating we don't hire women because we don't want to pay for maternity leave. And this is an area where the legal frameworks are really weak and need to be improved in line with the EU Work-Life Balance Directive. So what are our main recommendations? First, we believe the EU can do a lot more, and can governments, in investing in affordable childcare and early education. The EU Barcelona objectives also foresee that this isn't just for women, it also contributes to the quality of education and the educational attainment of children later in life, thereby better qualifying them for job opportunities in the developing labor market. But also, it would create jobs. It would transform currently unpaid work into paid work, creating jobs for women and also allowing women as traditional caregivers to enter the labor force because someone would be there to care for their children. We could also think about targeting the curricula, which was talked about a bit last night. How do we change minds of people? How do we reach children at a young age to promote European values? Well, why not also take a look at early education curricula, address gender inequalities, address gender norms, transform them, and promote the ideals that Europe has to offer? A second major recommendation we have is to amend the labor laws in the region. Most of them are currently open and undergoing amendments, so it's a very good time to take a look at them and ensure that they are aligned with the EU Work-Life Balance Directive. This will not only give women more freedom to enter the labor market, but it will ensure men's rights to spend time with their children, which we have seen as a significant gender inequality in the way that we are running our societies. We do believe there needs to be further training for labor inspectors. They are understaffed across the region. They don't know anything about gender-based discrimination, our interviews have shown. They need training on what this is, how to identify it, and of course better oversight in order to prevent corruption among the inspectors themselves. We also believe that in its efforts to address the informal economy, which is a European priority in most of the countries, that there could be greater efforts to do gender impact analysis, which basically means looking at how these programs to affect the informal economy could impact women and men differently. This is because we want to take a do no harm approach, that women would not be impacted negatively by these efforts to address the informal economy. And we believe that the EU could continue to follow gender-based discrimination and labor in the country reports more regularly, and to use political dialogue with the governments, coupled with IPA funding, to really pressure governments to take efforts in order to make these reforms and to address gender-based discrimination. And I must, because I come from Kosovo and I've been asked to be the voice of many women there here today, repeat the call to please move forward with the visa liberalization process. Keeping Kosovo's youth in a ghetto is not only incredibly discriminatory, but it's dangerous. And it's leaving space for actors to come in. It's leaving space for potential extremism, particularly when combined with brain drain and poor educational outcomes. If the EU wants to invest in youth, visa liberalization is the way for young people to see the world, to travel in the summer, to visit Europe, to understand European values, to learn and to understand. And I think if we really want to invest in youth, we need to open the doors and stop making Kosovo a ghetto. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Just keep in mind when, I won't ask you the question now, but just keep in mind, I was wondering if what you're doing in Kosovo, whether that is replicated in other parts of the Western Balkans, and if it is, are you in contact with them? Is there a kind of a network where you're doing similar things? Don't have to answer now, but keep it in mind for the future, for the rest of the discussion. I also wanted to ask you if something like #MeToo had it started in the region, and whether that was having any impact. So questions to consider when we go back to the discussion. Rudina, from your point of view, you've heard our two other panelists. What would you like to add to the descriptions and the narrative we're getting about discrimination and not enough ending of stereotypes in the Western Balkans?
I would like to start with a personal story, maybe, and to make this a little bit more personal. I think I'm one of those, I still want to consider myself young, but this is probably going to go on for a long time. But I'm one of those young people that returned to my country. I lived in the States for about 20 years. I left perhaps in 2001, in a very difficult time for Albania even then. And so I returned about 3 years ago, and I really wanted to get involved, and I did. And the thing is that once you return, you realize that a lot of people ask you one question, which is, why are you back? Why are you back here? Are you crazy? Go back to where you were, because this is not, you're going to get disappointed. So you ask the question about how many people return, and the data shows that it's really low. So about 60% of youth that leave and they study, they get their education, their PhDs. 66, I think, about one of the data that I have here shows that they do not return back to their countries. And the ones that actually do return, they get disappointed, and they maybe stay about 3 or 4 years, and they leave again. So, and this shows because, first of all, when they come back, I think one of the major challenges, of course I'm going to speak about Albania, but I think it's common throughout the region, is corruption, is the high level of corruption that exists in the society, and the way it's very much instilled in people's cultures and how the society works. So it's not really based on merits, it's really based on who you know and how well connected you are to the local communities or to the government or whoever works or whoever is in power, frankly speaking. So being back and being in politics, for me, it's really challenging because I feel that I have a duty to represent the young people in Albania and to make sure that they are constantly engaged. And don't know if you've known about this, but a year ago, in 2018, Albania faced a really big student movement. And it was very grassroots based, it was very eye-awakening, and it was really directed at the government and the Ministry of Education, because the education level in Albania is the quality of it is quite low. And when we're talking about migration, one thing that we're not really touching upon here is the fact that it's not just the youth leaving, it's people that are young professionals. And the young professionals leaving really is causing what we are calling now the brain drain. Because if the young, the nurses are leaving, the doctors, the ones that are found, they want to drive the economy forward in that country. If those people are leaving, then I think that's really damning for those communities, because it really shows that it's not the lower income people that are leaving, because that's usually one of the biggest causes for migration is their economic status, or the fact that they're not getting a good education quality in that country, or the fact that they don't have access to employment. So that's usually the three reasons I think that people leave, and that's all that, the root of it is corruption. So if there's anything that we need to bring in as young people when we do engage, is to really fight corruption. I think if we really want to show a really good example, even to the European Union, but I think my big thing has been, it's about us first and changing our lives and changing the communities, and not really about showing the European Union what we're doing. We really need to take care of our own people and really show that the corruption spread throughout levels of government or the justice system or everywhere that's present. The young people really need to show an example that they will never be part of that.
And they'll do things differently.
They do
Rudina,
things
so
differently.
you have stayed. You're head of the opposition in the parliament, and you've stayed. And,
Yes.
Yeah, and you
Albania
stayed
is
very quickly.
facing
Why?
a very I stayed because I needed to stand up to some really big guys and say that you're wrong to do this. So believe me, I've had a lot of criticism in Albania for doing that, but you know what? I hope that the young people will really have an encouragement because I did that. And I'm probably not going to make a huge difference in Albania, but I hope that people will follow that path and stand up to those big guys that have been in power for 30 years, and they can show you that really your career path or your career future really depends on me. And I wanted to say that to them, that no, it doesn't really depend on you. I have agency about my life, and I think that you're wrong to leave parliament, because parliament is the oxygen to democracy. And if you leave institutions, I think there's no way, even if the government is very authoritarian, that's where you fight them.
Right.
So, and then you vote.
And then you vote, absolutely. So thank you very much, Rosina. I want to actually turn now to Dia Rosani, right? Dia, you also from Albania. So I thought it would be a nice switch there. You're a 16-year-old programmer and designer who helped found DS Coders, right? So, yes, please.
Decoders.
Decoders, absolutely. And it's a team of young female coders. So just explain a little bit what you do, and a quick statement on how you feel, having heard Rudina and the others.
Hello, everyone, distinguished guests. I'm really honored to be talking to you.
You can also turn around, dear, so people can see you.
I wanted to start by explaining to you what our team has done with the app that we have created. We took an incentive that most youth in our countries do not take on, incentives like this. We started an application called JESA, addressing a very prominent issue in our country, that is gender-based violence. And with that, we managed to see a lot in our community, and we used all these 21st century skills that we have yet to see being used by our youth to improve our community, the society that we live in. And with all that we have done, we hope that we motivate all the other youth in our country and in the region. Because what our region is suffering from now is motivation and perspective. We have been wanting to get into the EU for the last 29 years, and we still haven't got in. So now the youth is thinking, where are we going? We have no more opportunities in this country to...
Thank you, dear. Thank you very much. Just very quickly, women like Rudina, are they role models for girls like you in Albania?
They are if you give them the opportunities.
Right.
And I would actually bring a personal story. A few days ago, I hosted 2 sessions for startups in technology that address community issues with girls in the society, with high school girls, my peers. And I saw future change makers. I saw innovators among them. They were bringing up these brilliant ideas. And they all came up because of one opportunity that was presented to them. And what if the EU invested more in opportunities for girls and boys as well, in entrepreneurship, in programming, in coding, in these skills?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So dear, well spoken. Thank you. Let's also get a comment from Olga Devic. You are, explain who you are, Olga, quickly, and turn towards
Thank you
all
very
the
much.
participants.
My name is Olga Devic. I'm youth delegate from Republic of Serbia. I'm youth rights and child rights advocate. I'm engaged in the youth issues since primary school, and I advocate for active youth and child involvement in decision-making processes, and I truly believe that they are the leaders of positive changes in our communities. I'm also a member of steering committee of your report, the digital platform led by UNICEF, which empower young people to speak on issues that they care about and to be heard by decision makers.
And obviously, UNICEF is doing a good job there. So thank you very much, Olga. So, thank you very much. I'd like to now turn to all of you. You've been here listening, and I had some questions, but I'm sure you have questions for them as well. So please don't be shy. Yes, Catherine, run to her, please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. You know that I'm a guest of, or a member of Friends of Europe for 10 years.
Thank you.
I would like to mention something that Team Judah has already brought as a model from the Balkans, why there is no incest in the government of Balkan countries, because there is a big nepotism. So this is not to be forgotten. This is a disease, and it seems that the virus is so much enrooted that it's hard to take it away. But I have a news for the governments in the Balkans, and especially for women, that there is a fund with the European Investment Bank, which has a huge budget in order to encourage women and to support businesses. So I would suggest to look through it, and you know, it's not enough only to raise the problem, but also to be active. And the second, the Balkan, in terms of empowering women, is not that bad, because it has been Kosovo a long time ago introducing quota 50% of women. But important is these women to be strong and to raise the voice and not to be manipulated by men. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In fact, in our discussions here, we have, I think, about 15 panelists, and 9 of them are women. So we're doing our bit for diversity as much as we can. So thank you very much for that. Let's take some other questions. I'll come to you in a second. Yes, please, here. Just very briefly introduce yourself.
Thank you. Ralph Joni, member of the Albanian Parliament, colleague of Rudina in the opposition. Just a very quick word of advice to our wonderful young girl from Albania, Dea. If you wait for your role models to be given the opportunity, they will never be given an opportunity, especially in societies like in the Balkans. You have to go out, grab it, and make the change in the community where you are, like you've done with your project. So with that in mind, my question is the following. I've personally been very much impressed and inspired by the strength of women and the civil society in Tunisia. I have a personal connection with Tunisia, and especially since the revolution, the women have actually managed to change society in Tunisia for real, and to stop constitutional proposals from the Islamic Ennahda party.
Very true.
To the panelists, obviously the Balkans is now in an authoritarian status quo, or I would call it vegetation mode, which the European Union, and especially the latest decision, is just helping solidify. Do you think women are capable to drive the change that we need in our societies in Serbia, in Albania, North Macedonia, Bosnia? Or are women just numbers, quotas, that men decide to put in party lists to get into parliament and to fill some chairs? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A very, very valid question. Anyone else wanting to come in? Yes, please. And here as well. Let's take the young lady over there at the back first. Yeah. I'll come to you.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Alba Brojka from Albania as well. I'm now going to speak on the hat that I have as Special Representative on Youth and Security of the OSCE Chairperson in Office. The only comment that I have is that I would like to see Dea and a youth representative from Serbia actually in the panel, because in the first panel, an hour, again, speaking about the creativity and the potential and the energy of the young people, but then we're not giving them the floor to speak on the potential that they have. I think that they have so much to share with us, but they simply don't have the space, neither the time. So I think that whenever we're talking about young people, we should let them speak about themselves and share their ideas instead of speaking of them while having them in the room only.
So in our defense, I totally agree with you. In our defense, this is the first time that we've had such a major delegation from representing young people. We've had them in the past as well. So we're doing our bit, but we also need to give time and space to the experts who are talking about the issues. So we are turning to them as much as we can, and you'll see that we're doing it throughout the conference. But thank you very much for that point. Well taken. We're working on that, young people, women, and diversity in terms of ethnicity and race as well. Major challenges, not just in the Western Balkans, major challenges here in Europe, European Union, I have to say. Thank you for that. The lady over here, yes.
Thank you. So Regina, I'm the representative of UNICEF in Serbia. Thank you so much to the panelists and also to our youth delegate. Indeed, a big source of inspiration for us and in daily work. My question is about actually the role of the private sector in everything you have mentioned, a very important force that can drive these ecosystem changes. Family-friendly policies. I could not agree more on the importance of investing in early care, but what's the regulatory framework in the region and the role the private sector is playing or not playing sufficiently? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. The gentleman over there, please. Keep your hand up. Yep. Men need to speak too, right?
Sorry, my name is Han Vos. Just on what you said between the balance between ladies and gentlemen on the fora.
We're not all ladies.
No, but
some of us are just women.
But Shada, I think you count more than two. You know.
Thanks.
But my question is, I hear all the time now here since 40 minutes the word corruption. 1.5 hours ago, when very interesting talks, I never heard that word. So what are you going to do to raise those concerns, which are also among the member states? I don't want to tell you my nationality. I don't have anything to do with them, with the Dutch. But what are you doing to make that valuable on political levels, which may solve some problems? Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed. Let's take the young lady over here and then go into the front row.
Hello, everyone. I will try to be as short as possible. So I would like to just address to all the things that were said in this room, like, and combine them into one thing. So I'm the owner of Bitrix Cultural Center. It is a center that I started at when I was 18 years old. And after that, in the last 5 years, I have also organized an international dance festival and camp in Skopje, in North Macedonia. So about the opportunities, a lot of people, because you've mentioned before that we should do the initiative and that we should go and try to do it by ourselves. And definitely there are a lot of young people who do that in my country especially, and I believe in all the other countries in the region. But the problems that we get is that after we start the idea and after we develop something and it develops in a pretty nice way and it has results, but the problem comes when we need like bigger opportunity to make it even bigger or to be able to invite people from the other countries in the region, because mostly young people have lack of funds or logistics for all of that. And there comes also the private sector as an important role that in my country especially almost nobody invests into young people. And I've knocked on many doors in my country, and either institutions that are like national institutions or private sector. And I must say that the help from all of those was really, really low. And all the time that I'm here, I'm thinking, I managed to communicate with some of you, and I've received some kind of respect that I haven't received in my country, which is, it makes me so happy that we are here right now to be able to speak about all of this, but also it makes me question, why isn't it that possible in our country? Why people do not open the door and let us speak and consider our opinion important enough?
Okay.
And that's also a part of the corruption as a final thing, and trust.
Sorry, interrupting you. When you were knocking on those doors, was it the fact that you were a young woman, or was it just because you were young? What do you think?
Both.
Okay.
I believe it's both because.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Okay, so we need to talk about that. Olga, you wanted to come in, and I'm happy to take. Actually, Jasna, I do want you to come in as well, because there were references to what the EU can do in this area. Okay. Okay, not prepared. Okay, so Olga.
I'll if I catch up, I'll
Okay,
raise the hand.
that's fine. Olga, please.
Okay, thank you. I would like to get back to the topic of labor market and to give some concrete recommendation, because I'm sure that is the biggest problem of young people in the Balkans. There is, in Serbia, 40% of young people are not employed. And we have a larger generation of young people in the world and in the Balkans. We have a very big potential, which we don't use it in the right way. So I think that we have to do on the fair conditions for employment of young people, because employers requires a very high level of work experience and practical skills.
Right.
And on the other side, we don't have educational system which provide us with that skills which we need for labor market and with education. And then we are going abroad, and that is the causes of a brain drain. So I think, just imagine that you have 25 years old, and that your employer required you to have 20 years of work experience. Ridiculous. Right. So we have to work on that the requirements be in the compliance with realistic competences of young people in the Balkans. Also, we have to work on the entrepreneurship skills to be learned from the early age, maybe also in the primary school, not in university.
But even before, the early child care, early child education. Yeah. I'd like to give the floor to your colleague as well. So since we're short of time, I'm sorry I interrupt, but we need to keep moving, please.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, of course. And my question for the panelists.
Just introduce yourself very quickly again.
Trina Hote, I'm the youth advocate at UNICEF office in Kosovo. I'm representing my country, Kosovo, here. I would like maybe to ask, how do you think are the ways that we can install the culture in the Western Balkan countries, women for women, so the support between our gender, because I see that it is really a problem in having the connection between women first and then with the males. So how you see it? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Should we now turn back to the panel? So let's start with you, Nicole, answering some of these issues and also the questions that, about how you actually approach authority from a position of being a young person.
Okay, there's quite a few points here, but I'll try to pick out a couple. Me Too movement was your first question. We had a movement before the Me Too movement. Maybe it didn't reach internationally, but it was together with Girls Coding Kosovo, our fellow young women coders, making an application for reporting sexual harassment on the streets, which has gone worldwide. It's called Walk Freely. But also standing up and having marches. And before 2015, no one talked about sexual harassment in Kosovo, like at all, at least not in public. But I could say as a result of this work, you have more and more people entering the streets, and not just women, but men, and the whole society calling for some address to this. I mean, of course, there's still plenty of work to be done, but I would say that this is happening. I'd like to comment on the issue of quota, and to turn it around. People always say, are women qualified to lead? Well, I'd like to say, are men qualified to lead? Because for every man you have out there who has been put there because of nepotism and clientelism, you have an equally and more qualified woman who is prepared to lead. So I don't think the question is, can women lead? It's, can we give women the space to lead? And I think that evidence from Europe as well, as shown by the European Institute for Gender Equality recently in their launching of the Gender Equality Index for Europe, has proven that quotas are essential in order to give women the space because of issues of nepotism and clientelism. Now, we all hope that one day those will go away, but then again, who knows, maybe one day men will need the quota for equal representation in the government, we could hope.
Right, but is there any chance that that kind of argument will win, will make some headway in the region about quotas?
Well, we're constantly arguing it. I mean, these are the arguments we have every day. And I mean, we see some progress. For example, I can talk specifically about Kosovo, where you have now the new law on gender equality, which calls for 50% representation, but it has not yet been amended in the electoral laws, and the government is not implementing it. So it comes to these issues we were also talking about of implementation. But I do believe that it can work and it will work. And I'd like to just finally talk about the point on regional networking that you asked earlier. I think that women activists' work is often not much known. It's another form of unpaid work. We are working late at night. No one really sees us, and obviously we could be better in our PR. Maybe more young women can help us with that. But there is a regional network. That is the findings I was presenting. I have more of these reports. We did this together, focusing on gender-based discrimination, and now we're working at a regional level with the EU support and support from CETA to try to involve more people in addressing discrimination. Right. We also have a regional network on gender-responsive budgeting that is trying to engage more with the EU on how to do gender budgeting in our region, but also with our governments. There's another network on gender-based violence, which is probably the oldest network in the region that has been actively fighting for funding for shelters, implementation of the Istanbul Convention and CEDAW in all of our countries. Right. And I think this issue of women supporting women is a very crucial issue that we also need to talk about more among ourselves. But I do think there are programs that are being developed in dialogue, mentoring programs, and these types of programs that could be expanded.
Thank you very much. Aji, can I go to you before I go to Rudina?
Thank you. I want to address the private sector, but I just wanted to add one thing to what you were saying on women. I don't know how to take your question exactly, but I think the point is not about turning around the women who are already in these positions, but what are we doing about capacitating women early on? So when you're talking about skills education and so forth, what are we doing to have the extra investment to make sure that women are going to that path where they're not just skilled to do those jobs or to be represented in parliament, but actually they have the soft skills to do that? Because a lot of the times that's why they are not there, not because they can't do it, but because they don't have the confidence, the negotiation skills, and so forth to stand up with the some of the type A personalities. So I think, the investment of soft skills in terms of women is almost as important as it needs to be coupled with the skills. But going back to the private sector, I think when we're talking about this idea of the lack of skills for young people to then match the needs of the job market that all of you are saying, and this is exactly what we're seeing, this is where it cannot happen without the public-private partnerships, because the public sector doesn't have the incentives to do that, as they already have enough in the public sector in terms of the labor market. There is no shortage of civil servants. It's the private sector who has the shortage, but they don't have the incentives to invest into the formal education sector. There's no processes and no incentives to do that. So we need to bring together the needs and the motivations. The private sector does need this kind of skill set. And when there is unemployment, at the same time, there's also unskilled labor that's working with the private sector. So the match is not there. So what we're advocating for is investments. If we're talking about where the EU invests, for example, in labor market projects in the Western Balkans, maybe I'm just not aware, but I don't think there are projects that they are investing in terms of public-private partnerships or multilateral partnerships where you are bringing in the non-government sector together with the private sector, academia and everything to provide this. So this space is there, I think, for the taking, where there's a lot of opportunities to make a change. And this is, for example, what we UNDP are trying to do, is bring in the private sector with their capacities and resources that they anyways invest in reskilling people the moment they are hiring somebody, bring it together with the public sector who has the incentives to create and increase the employment, and bringing together those who can actually offer this kind of skill training, especially for women and STEM on the digitalization. So I think this kind of partnership is extremely important. Sorry, one more thing, because you raised the idea of corruption. And we're talking about, in the previous panel, I think we talked a lot about the EU process and the political process. So I think, this is also something that those of you who are engaged in the political process of these countries is how to strengthen or how to bring together the political will with the processes that are happening. Because having the measures in place, that doesn't mean they are fully implemented and they are reflected in daily life. So certain regulation laws are there, but the gender equality law, for example, how does that look at the implementation level? And until citizens actually see that they are being implemented, the regulatory framework alone will not address that.
That's right. Thank you very much. If I could just make a suggestion. So we're going to have this conference on the future of Europe. And one of the suggestions I made in our op-ed about geopolitics begins at home in the Western Balkans is that civil society representatives, academia, think tank, women's group, activists, human rights activists, and others should be, from the Western Balkans, should also be part of this Future of Europe conference, because we've agreed this morning, and we agree, all of us, that it is about Europe, and the Western Balkans is about Europe as well. So take that home, think about it, and see how we can actually do that and ensure that the Western Balkans don't just get structural funding and more money, but also become part of the evolution of Europe and the thinking about the future of Europe. So that's one of the things that we're suggesting, Friends of Europe. So, Rudina, your turn.
Yes. Well, there are a number of questions that I'd like to address. First of all, your question about the Me Too movement. I think I'm going to be a bit controversial here, because I think Me Too movements don't really work in areas like the Balkans, because, first of all, in Albania, let's say, there maybe 1 in 3 women experience violence. So it would be the entire country going out with the Me Too movement, and it's not an easy process.
It's an awareness-raising thing, though, isn't it?
It's an awareness-raising thing, but it's one of those things that one size fits all doesn't always work. And I think if we really want to be realistic about it, and if we really want to change something, and my colleague raised this question, and I think it's a really brilliant question, because, and a brilliant example is Albania for failing to address it. The fact that in the government right now, in parliament actually, and this changed since 2008, we have 40% of women in parliament, and over 53% in the cabinet. So 8 ministers are women out of 15. And I just said 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence. 1 in 3, 60% of women are abused either psychologically, physically, sexually in the country. So are these women really working for other women? I don't think so. And it's sad, because Have things changed? Yes, of course things have changed, and I think things have improved, and the fact that the top has changed and the political representation of women at the top really drives and it gives incentives for things to change. But we haven't really seen that change yet, and I think and someone mentioned this before, laws are not just everything, right? We need to implement them. And if you look at Albania's laws, actually women are so favored in everything. And we have some of the best laws, but they're not implemented. And so if they're not implemented, then they're not good. I just want to go, I think,
very
point by
quickly,
point.
because I'm getting signals from my colleague Chris that we only have 3 more minutes left.
Oh.
So,
Well, this is, well, I want to address the question of, first of all, corruption. You mentioned corruption. How do we fight that, right? And Albania is going through this reform. It's called justice reform. And it's supposed to at least clean up that system where if you have a problem, when you go to the justice system or you face a judge, you can at least get a fair sentence, right? Or a fair treatment. We're still going we're going through this process. It's been excruciating because over more than 50% of judges have gone out and prosecutors, so the country is left without a constitutional court, a higher court. So basically, which means that the justice system was very highly corrupted. But how do we change the government, who is also very implicated in corruption? I think my colleague here and I, we're really big proponents of changing our system, our electoral system, to open up. Because right now in Albania, we have about 3 people that have been in power or have been rotating seats for the last 30 years. So our big cause is really to open up the lists in Albania so people can actually feel represented and someone can actually vote for me and not just for my party or my party leader, who actually decides on my career, whether I'm going to be part of that list or not. And you know, many people who criticize me and say, well, why did you become part of that list? You know, but how can you change the system if you don't go in the system, right? So I think this has been one of our big calls to change how people, to get people feel more represented, because we see a very big discrepancy
and your final point now, Rodina,
representation. And I want to address the culture thing that was asked before. How do we change culture? First of all, I think it's about supporting each other. What I really see is that we don't really support each other. And in our communities, we don't really look at each other and cherish the role models and see the positive models. And I think in the Balkans, we really need to really support each other and change the way we communicate with each other. And if there is one really big advice I need to give the youth, is just stay crazy and stay idealistic to your ideas and don't compromise. Don't just get your ideas across and fight for them.
okay. Great. I'm sorry to have pressed you and pushed you, but time is of the essence, and we have a lot of discussions still to come. We're going to be talking about reconciliation and about art and many, many interesting things that I hope you'll all stay for. A very important point about legislation, but legislation, laws, regulations are just not enough. It's implementation. But more than that, I would say what you said, Rodina, is also about culture and mindsets. And here at Friends of Europe, we talk to Middle Eastern women, Arab women, we talk to African women, we talk to women in Asia. And the similarities, the parallels are very, very striking. Some of the same problems, and that's why we have a global conference on women, you know, coming up, where several European countries don't actually sign up to that convention either. So we've talked about technical accession process, and then we said political decisions. But I think the most important power of the European Union for many of us is the normative power, the soft power, the power to inspire. But to do that, and this is something I don't stop saying to the European Union, you actually have to practice what you preach. Now, we do have a commission where there are more women. It's not the parity that we wanted. We do have a new parliament where there are more women, more young women as well. So I am really quite hopeful that this will bring change. But as you said, Rodina, this change will not come unless we keep pushing for change, for inclusion and for diversity. So thank you very much to the 3 of you, the 2 of you, the 4 of you, the 6 of you, all of you actually for contributing to this discussion. As I said, I think there's more coffee now, right? There is more coffee now. And then you'll be back, and we're going to be talking about the other challenge, which is of reconciliation. Thank you very much indeed.